You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have back on the Goldstein on Gelt show best-selling author David Shenk. David, a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be back with you.
Now, we've spoken, you and I met, I guess, a couple of years ago when I had read your fabulous book, The Immortal Game, about chess, because I'm very involved in that. And then, so we spoke about that, and then subsequent interview, we spoke about The Genius in All of Us. And, well, I've been sort of working my way back in your writing. And here we are now back in 1997. You wrote a book called Data Smog.
I did.
And I got some questions about it. But first of all, just why don't you tell the audience, what does data smog mean?
Data smog was my term, which now looks somewhat prescient, all the way back in the 90s, for this idea that we, well, I mean, it was a cute term and somewhat tongue-in-cheek term for this idea of information pollution. Obviously, you know, that's the metaphor. And the insight, which I basically stole from other people, as all good writers do,
sure,
is that you know, for almost all of the history of human civilization until very, very recently, the big challenge was to get enough information to live our lives. You know, communication was very, very difficult. Getting information on just basic, you know, that could support our basic life was always very, very difficult, and that was the challenge. And it was also very expensive. Suddenly, you know, over a period of a couple of decades, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, we had this transformation where suddenly information became very, very fast, very, very cheap. You know, some of the good stuff is still hard to get, but we suddenly flipped over from a time of information scarcity to an era of information proliferation that it's, you know, just overwhelming. And so, of course, we still all need good information, and we want great communication to live safe and rich lives. But suddenly being a human being in the information world is very, very different. It's instead of, you know, foraging for that beautiful morsel of information and forking over tons of money for it, it's a matter almost always now of weeding through tons and tons and tons of information to get the stuff that you really need. So information management and a real huge key of this is resisting the distraction, because we live in a very, very distracting world now where information has also become entertainment. And the book Data Smog and the book that came after that, The End of Patience, were both about this new challenge, this relatively new challenge, and trying to help people think through making this transition, you know, personally, as you know, family-wise, socially, politically, all the different ways that we need to kind of rethink the world we live in now that we're in an age of information abundance and tremendous info distraction.
Okay, so you say it very eloquently and make it sound, frankly, a little bit negative. In fact, one of the quotes you had was one of the topics in the book. You pointed out that in 1971, the average American was targeted by about 500 advertising messages, and 20 years later, they get about 300 advertising messages per day. So again, and it sounds like, oh, holy cow, that's so overwhelming. But frankly, a lot of us have simply learned the technique of, you know, ignoring everything except the few things that are interesting. So is this really a problem?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. First of all, let me stress, because this is a very nuanced topic, and in my book and whenever I talk about this, I try to very quickly make the point that this is not a book that, you know, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying that all this technology is bad, the information revolution is bad. On the whole, it is a wonderful thing. It's a part of human progress. There are innumerable advances We could spend hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks talking about all the great stuff that comes from information technology and the new speed of information. So I'm not putting down the shift. What I'm saying is that in the context of this wonderful shift, which does bring us progress in all sorts of ways, there are all sorts of amazing challenges. And yes, I mean, I respect you if you think it's not a problem for your life, but I think, yes, there are just fundamental challenges that we do deal with on a personal level and on a social and political level as well. One example of that is that we live in this cacophonous world now where politics seems to get louder and even more crass year by year, and same with just kind of the news entertainment complex. And people bemoan that, and they say that maybe it has something to do with values. But what it really has to do with is the just difficulty of getting people's attention. And it's just more and more difficult to get people's attention because there are more and more people producing information and coming up with inventive ways to get people's attention. The finite resource here, of course, is time and attention. Our attention span does not increase. We still have to sleep the same amount. We still have, lots of work to do during the day. We still, time is exactly the same as it was 50 years ago, but there are a lot more people competing for our attention now. And as a result of that, we do live in a very distracting world, a cacophonous world, a world where people who make the loudest noise tend to get not only power from that, but also become very wealthy from getting people's attention by making the loudest noise. And that's an incentive program that we have that presents a problem for all of us, I believe.
Yeah, I think that might be a little bit depressing. We're talking with David Shenk, the best-selling author of, among other books, The Genius in All of Us, The Forgetting, Data Smog, and one of my favorites, The Immortal Game about chess. We've been talking about data smog in particular. The question of how society has reacted to having so much data at its fingertips. In fact, you used a great term in data smog. You spoke about virtual anarchy as the result of too much data, and you spoke about the problems that a culture has with constant upgrades or so many statistics. And one of the things you also noted was what you referred to as hyper specialization. This is all sort of under the umbrella of virtual anarchy. These were things you spoke about decades ago. Do you think that a lot of this has actually come true?
Unfortunately, I seem to be on the precipice of something. That book. I remember. It's funny. While I was writing the book early on, kind of the first half of it was like a 2 or 3 year process, and for about a year when I was researching and writing the book, and again, a lot of the ideas I was culling from other people. People who know this subject and have done research on it. Realize that people have been making observations like this for many decades. So I just kind of, if I had an original contribution, it was to pull a lot of stuff together and to put some hopefully clever names on it and organize it a little bit and find a way to get people's attention, around the idea. I was also very lucky because the book came out in the mid to late 90s when the internet was really suddenly becoming a very popular phenomenon. So the book caught the attention of the media too. It became a bit of a hip topic for a little while. But yes, unfortunately, the stuff that I talk about, most of the stuff that I talk about in the book, which I wrote in the mid 90s, is really, as anyone could have predicted, become just more so over the years. And I actually am besieged with emails from people saying, I can't believe you wrote that so long ago, and when are you going to write the update? And this is
what's
really
it going to? That was my next question. What's it going to look like in another 10, 20 years? What's your thought on that?
Now I believe you really. Sorry for doubting you in the 90s. I think the answer is things are going to get better and worse. I mean, of course, as I said before, there's so many benefits from the information age. We don't need to spend time talking about this because there are all these commercial interests that do such a good job at pointing them out, and so many of them are obvious. It's the challenges, it's the drawbacks, it's the adjustments that we all have to make that are not always so obvious. And I think all I'm suggesting is that people pay a little bit more attention to the drawbacks and the adjustments they have to make in their lives, and to fairly regularly ask themselves whether these adjustments are worth it, or whether or not they're being actually kind of pulled along by all this thrilling technology. And I ask that question all the time too. I think that's what it comes down to is, you look at the tools you're using and you compare it to, you look at the life that you lead with those tools, and you ask yourself, well, is this the life I want to be leading, or are there some adjustments I want to make again to kind of pull back from some of these things, or to compensate for some of the ways that I'm being kind of pulled along, by all these thrilling tools, in order to live the fullest, richest life that I want to live.
So when we talk about the fullest and richest life, does it feel to you as though, let's say, the American culture really loves quantity much more often than quality? With supersized meals and 5 and 10 pound spaghetti sauces you can buy and 1,000 cable channels. Clearly, there is a great deal of or a great lack of quality there. But people just love getting more and more. If that's the personality of the culture that we're dealing with, is there really any possibility that people would be willing to give up on getting more information?
For sure, we live in a consumer culture, and we all crave more and more. And it's somehow, I hate to sound like kind of a radical and put this in a psychological way, but there is something to kind of, we all want to fill the hole in our lives of, we all want to, feel like we're living a rich life. And one kind of quick, easy way to get that thrilling feeling is to buy something, or to shoot off an email, or to get a text message. There's kind of like a quick thrill with either buying or communicating very quickly with someone, or getting, a quick fix on the internet. All those things are thrilling. What I find is that when you segment this out in terms of demographics, you look at the people who have the most education, who are who have the most resources, who are able to have a little bit more time to reflect in their lives and to make slightly smarter choices. Those are the people who actually realize, I need to pull back occasionally. I need to have some quiet space in my day. I need to have some reflection. I need to turn off these machines. I need to have some time to decide, to reflect on my own priorities, and do that with my family, with my wife and kids. And so it's interesting to see that people with resources and with education end up making smarter choices, that end up, even though we use all these tools, constantly, we also are a little bit better at saying, what, let's pull back. Let's make sure that we're not letting the tools take over our lives, and we're making we're calling the shots here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it. And presumably those people will be a little more successful, and maybe that is what will drag the rest of the society towards appreciating the fact they need more of a balance in their life.
Well, I think that's right, and I think just again to go back to another cliche, what we need people need to be educated, and education is the silver bullet. The more people get educated, the more they're able to make wise, more deliberate decisions, to plan, farther in advance for their careers and their and all their personal decisions. The more reflective they get, the better off they're going to be. We know that. I mean, that's how they do better in their careers. That's how they make better decisions in their personal lives. That's how we make better decisions, health decisions, and we live longer. I mean, it's the key to a better and longer and richer life. And part of that is taking a really close look at the technologies we use and at the speed of information. And there's nothing wrong with being thrilled by information and diving in and just kind of having the cheap thrill of listening to the shock jock sometimes, or just following a gossip blog or whatever. But not letting that take over your life, not letting that distract you from the important work that needs to be done and the important thinking. That's the key.
Sounds like very good advice. We've been getting excellent advice from best-selling author David Shenk. He's been on the show before. If you missed those previous interviews, be sure to download the podcasts at goldsteinongelt.com, or simply go to YouTube and look up Goldstein on Gelt, and you'll find all of the interviews there. David, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, just tell me, how can people continue to follow your work?
Well, I love this tour backwards, Doug, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Thank you so much for your
David's high school paper.
Right, we'll go back to when I was editor-in-chief of the paper in third grade. We'll talk about that next. My website is davidshenk.com, DAVIDSHENK.com, and I'm very good at self-promotion, so you'll see all my books on there, and frankly, all my articles too. There's, I'm pretty good at collecting that stuff. So, thanks for anyone who wants to take a closer look, and please get in touch with me and let me know what you think. There's an way to email me right from that site.
Okay, David Shenk, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.